We looked into schedule management plan, define activities, sequence activities, estimate activity duration. Now, with this information with us, let's go and develop the schedule. Let's try and understand and see how the project schedule is built. Okay, so what is needed to develop the project schedule, right? You've seen so many things, like the work that we need to do. So we need the scope, right? Then after that, the list of activities that we need to do. We need the activity list, the activity attributes, right? And then after that, we need the know the resources. Like for example, senior resource can do work faster, so shorter duration. So we need to have the resource breakdown structures, right? And then after team assignments, who's assigned on the team. So a lot of information is needed when you're trying to develop the schedule. We need to build the dependencies of the activities, what comes first, what comes second, what goes third, right? The sequence, so the precedence diagram method, so those are also needed. So with this information, let's try to see what all is needed in detail. So as I told you, the scope baseline. So whatever is the entire work that needs to be done, we need to know that so that we can develop the schedule based on the work we have. Then the schedule management plan is also an input. Activity list, what activities are going to do, the attributes of the activities. Milestone list, very, very important. So what are the milestones you want to deliver on this particular schedule network, right? Do you want to kind of break it up, or you want to do MVP 1, MVP 2? For Agile, you want to give shorter releases, MVPs. So these things. So we need to know all these things that we need to deliver. So the milestone list is very, very important. Then the assumption logs, what are the assumptions of the project? The network diagram, you want to put activities, dependencies, and put the network diagram, try to see new things like float, then do some techniques, right? Then basis of estimates, then any estimates of the duration of each activity resources. We need all those things. And then resource calendars, who's available when, resource breakdown structure, who will be doing what, team assignments, the risk register, right? So that's also an input. So based on the risk, you want to take some actions and make a better schedule. And then the project team assignments. So these are the inputs needed to develop the schedule. Okay. Remember this, the important part is the network diagram, the scope baseline, activity list, right? Resource calendars, all these things are very important. Now developing the schedule is an iterative process. Okay, so there are many steps to develop the schedule. So one is to the critical path method, then resource optimization techniques are there, tools and techniques, schedule comparison techniques is there, what if Monte Carlo analysis is there, and then agile release planning for agile projects, right? So let's try to understand these one by one in detail, and I'll be covering a lot of core concepts of PMP examination. I'll be calling out important topics for the PMP examination. So you'll see many of these in this video. So very, very important video. Pay attention and focus. Okay, so what is critical path method? Let's try to understand that. Okay, critical path is the longest duration on the project. Okay, let me just show this over here. Let's try to annotate this. Okay, let's say you have got this project for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, right? So, and then after that, let's take this path. So this path is 2 plus 3, 5. And then after that, you have got like 3 plus 2, again 7. Then you have got, it's going on. Let me just erase that and use a different marker so that you can, okay. So 2 plus 3, 5, 5 plus 2 is 7, 7 plus 2 is 9, plus 1 is 10. Now, if you go to this path from roof to electrical, 10 plus 2, 12, 12 plus 2, 14, 14 plus 4, 18. So this part says it takes 18 weeks to deliver the project. Now, if you go from here, 10 plus 2 again, 12 plus 2, 14 plus 4, 18. 18 weeks is again the duration. Now, if I take this path, 10 plus 2, 12, 12 plus 2 from going to flooring, it takes again 14 plus 4, 18 weeks. And then the final path, it takes 10 plus 2, 12, 12 plus 4, 16, 14, 16 plus 4, 20. So this path is 20 days, right? So critical path is the longest duration on the project. So this path is the critical path on the project. So this path over here, from planning, foundation, pillars, walls, roof, cementing walls, woodwork, and again going to the interiors. So this is a critical path with 20 weeks duration. Okay, remember this. So critical path is the longest duration on the project. Okay, so see the duration is 20 weeks. It is the longest duration on the project, and the float on critical path is 0. Okay, so in this entire path that we have seen over here, the float is 0. Okay, there is no float in this path. Okay, whereas if you take this path is 18 weeks and just 20 weeks, we'll talk about float soon. It's like comes to like 18 weeks on this path and takes like 20 weeks on this path. So you'll see a float of 2 weeks, right? So critical path has got no breathers, no buffers, so the float is 0 on critical path. Okay, remember that. So that's the next one. Activities on critical path have 0 float. Okay, that's about the critical path. Very, very important for PMP exam. Core concepts. Okay, it's the longest duration. The float is 0, and you, as a project manager, we must have our eyes on the critical path. Okay, that's very important. Okay, now let's try to see what next we have. Now, the next concept is called as near critical path. What is near critical path? Okay, so we saw there are like so many paths on this particular project. There are like 4 paths. Okay, the first path is this path, the second path is again this path, and the third path is this path, and the fourth path is this path, right? So many paths are available. Now, with all these paths available, right? So we should be seeing in now what is near critical path. The longest path, the 20 weeks duration path is the critical path. The rest of other paths are like for 18 weeks, right? All the 3 paths are 18 weeks. So all these are near critical path. As a project manager, we must have our eyes on near critical path. If something slips, something gets messed up, it could become the critical path next. On a project, you can have multiple critical paths also. Remember that for a PMP examination, on a project, you can have multiple critical paths also. Okay, so that's this. Next, let's go ahead. So then now float on projects. So what is a float on projects? So float is also called as schedule flexibility. It's like the breather for the project manager to manage the constraints to ensure that the resources are optimally used and deliver the project as soon as possible. Okay, so it's called schedule flexibility. It's also called a slack, and it helps PM manage the constraints on the project. So there are 3 types of floats. Let's try to understand that. What are the 3 types of floats? Very important for your PMP examination. You can expect some questions on these concepts. So total float, then you have got free float, and then you've got project float. Let's try to understand what are these 3 categories with an example. Let's go back to our dream house project. So total float. Let's say, for example, okay, now let me just take this. Okay, now let's say here on the during the walls week, we had got another activity over here for say 3 weeks. Okay, and it gets completed. Okay, let's say walls and somebody is laying down, let's say they're digging a well somewhere. Okay, I'm just saying. Okay, so they're digging a well, takes going to take like 3 weeks. Okay, now total float says on this project the critical path is 20 weeks. Okay, so the entire duration of the project is 20 weeks. So total float is wherever we have got this buffer. So here you have got 3 weeks and 2 weeks. So what is the buffer we have? The buffer we have is like 1 week. 1 week is the buffer. And on this path over here, when you see, you've got 2 weeks and 4 weeks, flooring and woodwork. So the buffer over here is 2 weeks again. So the total float on this project, we have the breather that we have on the entire project of 20 weeks is 3 weeks. So that is your total float. Okay, understand this concept. In the entire duration, wherever you have the breather, okay, so you've got one breather of 2 weeks over here doing flooring and woodwork. During the walls, you have got one more breather of 3 weeks. Okay, but then I can that again change the critical path, because now it becomes like from 20 plus 1 more extra, it becomes like 21 weeks is the critical path now. Okay, that's how things change. Now let us look into the next concept called as free float. Now, we saw what is total float, some of the floats on the project before the committed date to the customer. Now, let's look into what is free float. Free float is the float between a couple of activities or multiple activities. So, if you can see here, let me show that to you. Okay, so this is a 2-week activity and this is a 4-week activity. So, the free float is 4 minus 2, which is equal to like 2 weeks. Okay, so this is the free float we have between flooring and woodwork. So flooring could start early over here or give a 2 weeks break and then start somewhere over here also, no problem, right? So free float is the float between the activities. Again, this float doesn't impact the end go live date. Whatever the 20-week duration which you have, this is now getting impacted. Okay, so that is a free float. Okay, finally, we have one more concept called as the project float. Okay, Okay, now free float is some notes. So flooring can be delayed by 2 weeks and can start in, let's say, week 15 instead of week 13. As I told you, it can start anywhere between those 4 weeks. Okay, but before 2-week duration, right? That's important. Okay, now let's talk about the concept of project float. Okay, so what is project float? So we have a critical path of, say, 20 weeks duration. Project float is the float which we have before we commit a date to the customer. So I want to commit a rate to customer which is a little bit more than the actual duration of the project, because I want to feel safe. I need to have some buffer. I need to kind of do thorough quality checks. Because of all of these reasons, I want to kind of take a little bit more time. So that time is the project float time, the extra time after you complete everything, and you want to feel safer because you want to mitigate many risks over there. So in this case of example of the dream house project, so probably we are expecting some risk over there for 1 week risk during the holiday period around Diwali, right? Then probably you're expecting some rains or something, so we're putting 1 week buffer for the climate. Then again, there's one more week buffer of overall project for the procurement of items, something could get delayed. So keeping all of this in mind, we are kind of giving the final date. That's like 23 weeks. So your project float will be, okay, your project float will be 23 weeks minus the actual time taken for the critical path, 20, which is equal to 3 weeks, right? So you've got 3 weeks extra buffer with you. So 23 weeks is what you go and commit the customer. After 23 weeks, I'll give you the project. Okay. After the end of this, plus 3 more weeks is what I'm adding here. So at the end of this, I'll get 23 weeks. So 23 weeks is what I'm committing to the customer. This is the project float. Okay, as a vice project manager, you have to take care into all the risk, all the issues that would happen, add in proper buffers and estimates. This is not called as padding, but these are realistic things that you have to think of what could go wrong on the project and put all this information on the project and then give the final date to the project. So always consider adding a project float before giving a date to the customer. Okay, great. Now let's go ahead and see a little bit more on the schedule. Okay, great. Okay, so the amount of time a project can be delayed without during the external import deadline. So you don't want to go beyond 23 weeks, but you want to finish the project by 20 weeks and use the 3 weeks of buffer to close on any other activities. Okay. Now, sometimes it is important for the schedules to be managed, and you want to reduce the duration of schedule. So this is called a schedule compression techniques. There are 2 techniques in this over here. So on the project, sometimes the client would say, no, we want to go live within 20 weeks or 24 weeks because you want to beat the market by one month competition, right? So schedule compression is a way to utilize the float on the project. Okay, schedule compression is a technique, is a way to use the float on the project. It can fast track activities on the critical path, get things done faster. So there are 2 types of schedule compression techniques. One is the fast tracking, one is crashing. Very, very important for your PMP examination. Know this techniques. You can expect some questions for you on the examination. Okay, so what is fast tracking? Fast tracking is doing work or activities in parallel to reduce the time. You want to see what can be done in parallel. For example, I told you, working on multiple APIs in parallel, if you can do that, it's not interdependent, then you can actually save time. Okay. So you're going from sequential to parallel, one by one. Whatever could be done in parallel, there are no mandatory dependencies. You want to do those activities. Okay, that's called fast tracking. You want to reduce the duration by doing multiple things together in one point of time. So for 2-3 resources, you can work on things in parallel. If you just have one resource, you will not be able to do these things by fast tracking. Then there is a risk of rework because something is still not complete and started off the work for that. Like for example, design is still not completed and started off in the development just to save some time. There could be some change in design that could cause some rework. Getting that? So there is a risk of rework. Remember this important core concept of PMP examination. Then there is an increase in risk. Okay, the risk increases because you could do rework. You will have to kind of sometimes work out everything once again back, right? And since there are so many more activities running in parallel, there has to be a lot of communication. Parallel communication will be more. Okay, so use when dependencies are not mandatory. So that's about fast tracking. Remember this concept for your PMP examination. The next concept is crashing. Crashing is you want to reduce the duration of schedule by adding more people, more resources on the project. Okay, so what you're trying to do is you're adding more resources to get the work done faster. It increases the cost. So more people, more resources means more cost will be taking place. Okay, it is a little bit less riskier than fast tracking because they're adding more people and there's no kind of overlap or stuff like that. But risk is there, but less compared to fast tracking. Okay, maybe risky. So that's about crashing. Remember these 2 concepts when you're trying to reduce this schedule duration. One more very important concept is the most number of conflicts on project happen always on schedule. Okay, in your PMP exam, remember that most conflicts happen on schedule. So project management always there's a contention on schedule, right? So let's see. Now, let's say now that conflict on schedule, the project was supposed to be for 24 weeks, and you want to, the customer wants this project to be done in 20 weeks. Now, how do you manage this schedule? What are the different ways to ensure that the schedule can be managed, right? And deliver the project on time, right? So, note this, crashing is one way of kind of reducing the duration. Fast tracking is one more way. Reviewing the risk early and then mitigating those risks early is one more way of kind of. So what I'm saying is these are the ways you can negotiate and think and then reduce the duration of schedule. Okay, it's just not, you don't do it blindly and you don't say deny it or like just like that. Okay, or you can talk to the customer and say, okay, instead of 6 features, I'll just tell you they will do 5 features. Okay, so we can talk on these things, then reduce the quality. You can reduce the iterations quality. It's okay, fine. If you are reducing the duration, I can just do 2-3 checks. I can't do the security check or the performance checks. Okay. So I'll stand your ground and say, oh, I can't change the timeline. Okay. So these are some of the techniques. And finally, there's overtime, work overtime, get things done. There's not recommended by PMI, but overtime also can be done to reduce the duration of the schedule. So this is how you will manage as a project manager, the schedule manager, when there are conflicts. Okay. Now, resource optimization. Now we spoke about the reducing the duration of this. And now how best we can optimize the resources to work on this project schedule. So there are 2 techniques. One is resource leveling. One is resource smoothing. Do not get confused between these 2 things because you will be tested on these concepts also. Right? Resource leveling is a concept wherein you're going to level large the schedule. You want to extend the schedule. Okay, in resource leveling you are going to extend the schedule. Okay, so that if somebody is working say 14 hours a day for 4 days or 5 days a week, then probably you can take 8 hours and remaining 6 hours of work you can put it to him in the next week. Getting that? That's called leveling the schedule resource, right? Optimally using the resource. So in resource leveling, L for leveling, L for large is the larger duration. The duration of the project extends. Okay, now because the duration is extending, the cost will also increase because the resource working for a more longer period of time. That's resource leveling. Now, resource smoothing is you will utilize the floats on the project for a person who's doing more work on a particular day. So wherever you see float, the extra 6 hours or 14 hours of work somebody is doing, so the extra 6 hours of work you'll ask him to do during the float of the project. So this kind of optimizes the resource project and people are happy to work like this. Okay, so these are 2 resource optimization techniques, resource leveling and smoothing. So remember the subtle differences for PMP examination. Okay, then agile concept on project management, on schedule management for PMP examination, velocity. Always remember, if there are 2 or 3 teams working on software development projects and at a particular speed, so the output or the effort is calculated in terms of velocity as story points. No 2 teams will be having the same kind of velocity because the resources are different, people are at different speed. Always remember, in the first sprint, you will not be able to, before the first sprint, you will not be able to tell what is the velocity. After the first velocity is where sprint is where you get an idea of the velocity and you say, okay, fine, we could do like 42 story points in the next sprint. So that's an empirical way of giving the estimation based on the current way we are working, not because of historical information. Okay, so that's velocity. Velocity is the number of unit of the work you're getting done in a particular sprint. It is also used, they also use story points of the velocity, and velocity for 2 different teams will not be same. And the first sprint doesn't give you cannot tell before the first sprint what's the velocity going to be. Okay, remember these terms on velocity for a PMP examination. Okay, now it also helps us in planning the upcoming releases. Okay, based on the entire, let's say for the you've got say 400 story points and one sprint you're going to deliver the 40 story point. You can easily say I need 10 sprints to deliver the entire project. Okay, followed up with one of the integration sprint, and then you can do the testing and move to production. Okay, that's on the velocity. Now, agile release planning. Agile release planning is the project is divided into releases or iterations. So let's say a project is there, it's going to go live in say 3 months. If it's got a 6 sprints or 6 iterations, every iteration you're working on a use case and testing and saying what's going to work efficiently. Okay, agile release planning says that projects are divided into releases, and these iterations will give value to customers after the end of the release. Okay, after 6 iterations, when something goes in production, that's the time value is delivered to the customer. But for every iteration, you do a review and get a feedback from the customer. That's the beauty of Agile, right? Then multiple iterations can be a part of one release. Remember that projects can have multiple releases by MVP1, MVP2, MVP3. Top priority items chosen on from backlog for the next iterations for the projects. There's another way of representing the information. It's called cumulative flow diagrams. Give a good view of total work, what is in progress and what is completed. So CFD is a view, graph that gives you a view of how does it in progress, what is being completed, and what is the total work there. Okay, so that's about Agile release planning. Clear? Okay, now finally, what are the outputs of the developed schedule? So let's see and understand that. So project schedule can be shown in, so output is what? Schedule baseline. The final schedule has been developed. 24 weeks, 20 weeks, as a schedule baseline. Project schedule can also be shown network diagrams or milestone charts or bar charts based on the kind of the audience you have. So you can go into milestone chart, you show the leadership team, network diagram, you can look and see how to go to solve things. Bar chart help you tell the progress of the team, right? Then schedule data. All data used to create schedule, milestone, activities, attributes, estimate, dependencies, assumptions. All these are outputs. Okay. Then a change because there's some changes to the schedule to be done, and change because it needs to be made. It is going to touch the baselines. Then project document updates, duration of estimates, resource requirements, all these activities, all these documents get updated. Activity attributes, risk register, assumption log, lessons learned register. So these are the outputs of developing the schedule. Okay. Finally, for a PMP examination, very, very important thing you remember is critical path, near critical path. What are the three types of floats, schedule optimization techniques, resource optimization techniques, network diagram. Watch this videos a couple of times. If you like it, please do like it, comment, share, subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching my video. This is Arham Faraaz. I wish you all the best for your PMP examination.